Thank you so much for joining us this evening. You are joining us with the Mastering Your Move to Switzerland, a step-by-step guide for U.S. citizens and their families. And we'll get into introductions in just a second. This is being sponsored by the American Women's Club of Zurich for their workshop week. So we thank you so much for registering and supporting that institution. Just a quick disclaimer, this is general information and cannot be relied upon for your specific and unique situation. Speak to your own financial advisor, your own immigration attorneys, and relocation team to make sure you get the right advice for your situation. I'm Arielle Tucker, and like many of you, I'm a U.S. expat. I've been personally and professionally exploring cross-border tax and financial issues for over 15 years. I own and operate Connected Financial Planning, a fee-only financial planning firm, and we say fee-only because we are only compensated by our clients. We do not sell products. I write quarterly for Bloomberg Tax, and I've been featured in numerous media outlets discussing cross-border financial planning and tax issues for expats. Please feel free to connect with me and Connected Financial Planning on LinkedIn and Facebook, where I engage with the broader expat community on tax and financial planning issues throughout the week. Julia and Marianne, I'll let you introduce yourselves.
Sure. Hi, my name is Julia. I'm Swiss, born and raised here in Switzerland in Zug. And I worked 20 years in aviation as a flight attendant and senior cabin crew member for various airlines. And in 2010, I became self-employed with a concierge service first, and 2014 a relocation service. And I'm a co-founder of Alliance Relocation. We are 5 very experienced relocation consultants who have a company in Zug, and always feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. And we are experts in relocation service.
Hello, my name is Marianne Blommers. I am in Switzerland now for 15 years. I'm actually I learned how to do everything by myself in Switzerland. I've been a broker before in Holland, so I'm half Dutch, half Spanish. I learned the job in Holland, and when I came here in Switzerland, I thought I could do it all by myself. And then I discovered that it works a little bit different in Switzerland. So we really need to adjust, and there's some different rulings. So therefore today we're to help you. I'm also a founding partner of Alliance Relocation, and we work in Zug, Zurich, and Lucerne. And feel free to join us through Instagram or LinkedIn.
Yeah, and I just want to highlight when we're talking about Zurich, Lucerne, and Zurich, these are all the German-speaking regions. That's where your firm is primarily based. And so people who are wanting to contact you because they're moving to Geneva or Lausanne, they could potentially contact you, but you would just introduce them to your partners down in more of the French-speaking part. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Okay, great. Okay, so we have a lot to cover today, so I'm really excited to dig in. So we're going to talk a little bit about why Switzerland and explore the benefits of living in Switzerland and common reasons that people relocate or wish to relocate to Switzerland. We're going to go through a step-by-step guide, and we're going to talk about different visa types, housing, settling in, and really important in Switzerland, the cultural adaptation. I'm going to talk about the financial considerations for your move, key tax considerations, cross-border financial planning, retirement adjustments, and also kind of some of the cost of living insights. If we have some time, we're going to jump on and be sure to do some Q&A. Savannah is our producer, and she's also our paraplanner at Connected Financial Planning. So she's going to be in the chat. So if you have quick questions or you're looking for a resource, feel free to put that in the chat. It is important to note that this event is being recorded. So anything in the chat or if you say something that could potentially become public, part of the public recording. So just please be mindful not to put any personal information in the chat or anywhere else. Okay, so let's dive right into it.
Yep. So I will tell you a little bit about Switzerland, and most things you already know. That it's very important for me to live in Switzerland. It sounds simple, but we have a lot of fresh air and good nature. And so I have been an asthma patient in Holland, and since I live in Switzerland, I can really breathe well, and I don't need any medicines anymore. So I'm super happy to be here. It's also super clean. So I had a neighbor, and he actually got a fine from the police by throwing away a pizza box on the road. And I was like, ooh, I was just new, and I was surprised that this happened. And then he had to do some service hours to clean up the city. And I think it's really nice. You really see when you walk around, it's a super clean city. Of course, you can have lots of nice walks and hikes. Most important for me is also the political stability. What I like a lot about Switzerland is that there's many partners here. So you have many different political parties. So everything is negotiated and talked about. And I think it's a very pleasant way. So everything from left to right has to talk and work with each other. Then economically, of course, the tax we will talk later. That's all for Arielle later to discuss. There's a fantastic healthcare here. So it's, yes, it's a little bit expensive. It's like 350 francs on average. There is private and there is semi-private, but even if you go to the local hospital here, the cantonal hospital, you get very good service, but you can also, let's say if you are in a hospital and you've been operated, you can ask to pay some extra, and then you're semi-private, and then you can be with 2 people in the room. There are also very good private hospitals all around. And then the schooling we talk about later, because that's a big topic. Most important here is the safety, and that's I now have a few American clients, and I really emphasize that everything is so safe here, and there's a very low crime rate, and children can really play on the street. So that's a big difference. Please, Arielle, can you maybe move to the next slide? And then Julia, can you maybe tell me something? You see a beautiful relocation timeline. For me, it takes about between the first step until you find the house and you move in. It takes like 3 months. It can be faster, but that's the average. So maybe you, Julia, you can tell me a little bit.
Yeah, so the timeline, of course, can be fast, can take a little bit longer. Always depends on criteria of housing, and also what is the setup. So first, usually the employer takes care about visa authorization, then immigration. We take care of registration at town halls to get the residence permit, which takes also several appointments to finally get it. And then it depends if a family goes, the children go to local school or to an international school. So we always say if you pick an international school, then you check first on their availability. If you secure the spot, then you can basically organize the housing around. If you plan to send your kids to local school, then choose the town you like the most, select a home, and then every kid goes to the local school from the town. It's not that you could choose to which local school a kid can go. It's basically assigned. Sometimes in kindergarten, primary school, they even check if the amount of girls and boys is good and the mixture of nationalities, and then the school decides where the kid is going. Then the best situation is if somebody takes a temporary housing in the beginning. We always say at least 60 days, up to 3 months. Then you are here, you have time for the viewings. But of course, we are also able to find a home if somebody is not here. Makes it a little bit more difficult because not every landlord or agency allows like a video tour, but we are usually open for all kinds of situations. But if you choose to come into a temporary housing in the beginning, that's probably the best situation. Then we do the so-called home search, which is also a bit different than in other countries, because in some countries you basically take what you like. Here what you like, you apply, maybe with 10, 15 or even more people, and then the landlord decides who gets it. The agency decides who is the best fit for the house, and then hopefully you get an approval for a flat. Then, of course, we also take care of all the insurances, whatever it needs be attached to the housing contract. We also do translation of housing contracts. And then what comes with the housing is opening a bank account, again, health insurance system, the insurances for cars, whatever it needs to completely settle down. And then, of course, your moving company comes or you buy some new furniture. And then the settling in is also set up the internet, set up the utilities, electricity. And then, of course, we take care of our clients until they're fully settled and everything works well.
That's such a great timeline. There's a couple points that I just want to expand on just from my own experience of moving to Switzerland twice as a US expat. One is schooling here. The public schools are amazing. I think the Swiss school system, the public school system, just got voted one of like the top country in the world for education. And I think that's really important to highlight that if you are moving in and your children are younger, yes, they may not know German or French or Italian yet, but they can very quickly and easily integrate. And if you're planning on being there for a longer period of time, I think it's really interesting to explore the public school, because I think maybe you'll talk about this a little bit more later. The international schools are very competitive and also very expensive. And so even if you're coming here on an expat contract with the intention to being here longer, your expat contract may only cover 3 to 5 years of schooling expenses, and then you are on the hook. And, I don't know what the average is, but I often see schooling fees per child in the range of 50 to 60,000 Swiss francs. Does that seem reasonable, or am I way off there?
I think it's around 30,000 a year for most of the schools in Zug and Zurich, right, Marianne?
If you have a kid that is in the 12th grade, it's even more expensive, because then you pay the exam amount and then it can go up to 30, 32, 35 even. Yeah.
Yeah, and that doesn't always include after school childcare or lunches or the ski holidays, right? Transportation. So once you're all in, it's not that base price. So I think that's a really important consideration for US expats. Obviously, if you're moving into Switzerland and you have an 11th grader or a 12th grader, you basically have to do international school. If your child is older, you really can't force them to suddenly learn a language, learn an entirely different system, because the school system is very different from the US system that we have. The other thing you touched on was permanent housing. You highlighted a little bit the difficulty of finding permanent accommodation. It is incredibly challenging if you're looking to be in a major city, if you're looking to be in Zug, if you're looking to be in Zurich, or in a commuter town where it's really easy to get into those main cities. It's very challenging to find housing. And we have a dossier that we've put together multiple times to apply for apartments. It's a letter in German about our family, with a picture of our family, with employment contracts, and it's a whole package that we've been taught. One of our relocation consultants had told us, like, this is how you apply for an apartment. Is that something that you are helping your clients kind of go through that application process?
We do it all.
You do it all. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
We tell them what we need. We will get into it later as well again, but we can then skip it maybe. We tell them what to bring. We want copies of their passport, copies of their birth certificate. Well, birth certificate is not for the application. Copies of the a reference letter, a telephone number of an HR, all these things, and we apply for them. The chance that you get an apartment when we apply is much bigger. And we also...
Yeah. That's a great point. And when you are in such a competitive environment, and we found this a few times moving back into Switzerland, living in Berlin, living in the Munich area, you kind of have to pay for someone who knows the system to save a lot of time and honestly money to get the apartment that you want. It is a very competitive. And if you're coming in as an outsider and you don't understand the system, I think it's money well spent to work with an expert here. Okay, we'll go to the next slide.
Yes, thank you. So now we talk about the permits. So once you made it into Switzerland, congratulations, then we need to register you. So there are different kind of permits that you can get. So the most common one that you will get is the P permit. As an American, it is allowed with this permit to work as an employee or as an independent. You can set up your own company and you can live in the country without working for the wives. That's also. So they're also entitled to bring their family, and this permit is usually for 5 years. Then after, maybe it's not so big, so I will do it quickly, because after 10 years, if you've been living in the same canton, so in the same region, then you're entitled to have a C permit. For this one, you're allowed to stay in Switzerland as long as you want. Important to know that wives with a C permit, can also happen with a B permit, cannot work automatically, depending where you are from. So it's important to check that before you come to Switzerland. Then we also have an L permit that is issued for people who are here for a certain amount of time. It's sometimes also used for students, and that's only a permit for 1 or 2 years. It can also sometimes be for a few months. So what is important to bring is, depends on the area where you are, but you need to bring your passport, you need to bring your work contract, birth certificate, depending if it's Zug or Zurich, marriage certificate is important, and a copy of the lease. And that's basically everything. And then you go to the town hall together with us. In Zurich, you have to make an appointment. And in Zug, we can do it online for you. So it's all different. And in Luzern, you also have to pass by personally. Yeah, so maybe you could go to the next slide.
I want to just stop on here just
Yes.
quickly to talk about a few things. So with the B permits, it's still renewed every year. And for US citizens, you are actually eligible for a C permit after 5 years. That's very specific for certain nationalities. Not all nationalities have that, where you can get the access to the C permit after 5 years. But for US citizens, you have that. And the nice thing about that is your B permit is very much tied to your employer. So if you come here on a job with a B permit and you decide you hate your job, you now need to go find another employer to sponsor you, and that can be very difficult. So once you're able to obtain the C permit, you like kind of your world opens up. You're not as reliant on finding an employer. So that's really important. The other thing is L permits are actually very common. And we had a lot, I think even there was a lawsuit with Google, because basically everyone coming in through Google and a lot of the other big employers from the US, they were getting L permits, even though they had permanent contracts. So for the first 2 years, they were on L permits. We call those the loser permits. It's
Step in there a little
yeah,
bit, because we know that, because we encounter this with our
yep.
clients. Sometimes people get an L permit because they have, when we apply, they have a temporary accommodation. And
hmm
and that's exactly when they give you an L permit. And then sometimes they change it after the period of time that is written down. If it's 1 year, then after 1 year you get your B permit if you have a permanent home. So the housing is really a very big item.
It is. It's so huge. And I think the other thing to note is if you're coming here on a B permit or an L permit, it's very likely that if you have a trailing spouse who's coming with you, your spouse may not be eligible to work. And that
Mhm.
is a really important consideration from a planning stance. You need to just confirm, what permit am I going to get? What permit is my spouse going to get? Because I have so many friends who come here, highly educated, individuals who are shocked that because of the permit that they have, they basically are completely shut out from the workforce. And now they have to go and find an employer to sponsor their own visa. So I know you highlighted that, but I see this all the time with trailing spouses.
Yeah. Maybe we can go to the next slide.
Sure. So Marianne will tell us a little bit about the differences between taking a temporary housing or like permanent housing from the very beginning.
Yeah. So important is for us or for everybody who comes here is that you have some housing. It can be temporary, it can be a long term. Ideally for us, that makes our lives easier is that you have a temporary housing. Then we can start the immigration, especially from America, because you need a visa. And then we can start the process. Without having a house, it's impossible. So there is a difference on how to apply for a temporary accommodation or a permanent one. A temporary accommodation is much easier. It's in fact, I will then probably send you some links for 2-3 possibilities. You like one and then I apply. I just send them because I have the contacts with them, or Alliance has the contacts with them. You send them who's going to live there. They send you a work contract and then it's okay. So that's super simple. Then if we would, what I also sometimes do is people come on an orientation tour. But they say, I really would like to have my permanent home right away. And what we do then is I ask them to come at least like 3-4 days so that I can have an orientation tour, but I can also do some housing and try to get as many visits as possible, which is not easy in the market. But we have managed to do a group move, and we found almost everybody a place even before they officially came here. But what we always say, what is important, that before the people come, I gather all the official documents. And that is, like you said, Arielle, it's your lease or your temporary lease, a personal story with a nice picture of yourself. I always say put in an outdoor picture. That really helps. The Swiss love nature. A credit report from America. In Switzerland, if you live here, they want a Betreibungsauskunft. That's similar. And we would like to get an HR person with a Swiss telephone number from a person who speaks German. Without this, it's going to be very hard.
You mean for the reference check?
For the reference check. So if the reference person doesn't speak German or has an American number, they don't even bother to call.
It's like getting a job. I mean, honestly, that's
worse. Yeah. Yeah. It's a challenging job. We still get the houses that we would like to have. That's why I always ask, and Julia the same, and all our other partners, I really would like to know how much they like the house. So if they really like it, I push it like hell, but then it needs to be certain that they also say yes when they get approved. Because that's the reason why we mostly get the houses. Important, Julia already mentioned, is that you get chosen by the landlord. That is something really difficult for Americans to understand. In American, the client is the king, and they have all the options and they choose, and here it's the other way around. We try to show you the houses you like. You tell us the houses, you tell us which ones you like best, and then we apply. But it is at the end, it's the landlord who decides. Therefore, it's for us very important to present you in the best positive possible way. And maybe, Julia, you can say some typical housing items in Switzerland that are different from America or other countries.
Yes, I can, of course. Arielle also told me I have to mention that I was a realtor in House Hunters International.
Yes, thank you.
Twice. So one episode for Lucerne, one episode for Solothurn. And it was also one of the scenes when the couple came into the flat, and then they said, aren't there any air conditionings? No, we don't. Then you only get like light fixtures on the ceiling. It's not that you get lights. Lights are only in the bathroom and in the kitchen. The rest of the lights in a flat you have to choose by yourself and install by yourself or by an electrician. Then in the bedrooms, usually we don't have closets. So you order your closets at IKEA or elsewhere. If you're lucky, they're built in. Then in the kitchen, usually microwave is not provided. So if you want to have a microwave, not a problem. You buy one of those portable ones and just put it somewhere on the counter. We more use regular ovens and then steamers. Steaming is big here in Switzerland. Some steamers were not used once when people leave again, but some people really love it to cook with steam. And same thing also, quickly back to the air conditioning. You can, of course, always buy a portable air conditioning to put in your bedrooms. The last few summers were very hot. We use the ventilators. We open the windows in the evening. But of course, it's not the same as you had an air conditioning all throughout the flat. And then when it comes to basically a bit of rules, when we go to visit homes, especially if the tenants are still there, we always ask if we should take off our shoes. Then we enter on socks. We always ask if we want to open a closet or a fridge, a freezer. We always ask, and especially we ask if we want to take pictures or videos. Some tenants, they don't want it. If they say no, we prefer to not have any pictures taken, then I sometimes ask them, can I do like a video call with my clients? Because then there is no data at the end, instead of taking pictures or video. So once you live here, it's also a very easygoing life when it comes to, even if you live in the city, you quickly go outside. There is always a farm nearby who sells farm products such as egg, vegetable, fruit, sometimes even meat. You will see some flower fields where you pick your own flowers, and then there is just a little piggy bank where you put in your money. So a lot is also on honesty here. So people, of course, there is always the ones who do not follow the rules, but mainly, they pick their flowers, put the money in the piggy bank, works very well. Farmhouses, you pick your stuff, your potatoes, your eggs, and you put your money or pay online, and it works very well. And I know that people coming from abroad find it hilarious.
Yeah, it is. I still find it funny. And now we've come back after we first moved to Switzerland in 2011, and we've come back. We came back in 2023. And I find it really funny that there's way more vending machines everywhere now. And you just use Twint. Everyone uses the bank payment Twint. And so you just we can go and get our eggs on Sunday, have a walk in the country and then get our eggs and walk back home. And that's really nice. I love that you're talking about the freedom. Do you want to mention any of the funny little Swiss rules about not flushing the toilet after 10 or not mowing your lawn on Sunday? Because I feel like we have to a little counterbalance the narrative here.
Yeah, I think the rumors are a bit more strict than it actually is, because this is always the first thing that people ask me, is it really true that I cannot flush my toilet in the night? And I said, where, please, do you read that? Because it's just not true. Of course, you can always flush your toilet also in the night. I always say, if you live in a bit on an older building where you can really hear the pipes, and if somebody's taking a bath every evening at 11 or 12, then probably the neighbor get a bit annoyed. Of course, Sunday for us is a bit of a holy day, so it would not be good if you use your, vacuum cleaner is probably fine, but hammering on the wall, putting up some pictures would probably not be appropriate. So use the Saturday for that. The Sunday is a bit of a quiet day for us. People go to the mountains or go somewhere else. But working in the flat or outside is not so appropriate, I would say. But the rumors are sometimes even stricter than it actually is. Also, everybody can have a party in the evening. Make a little note downstairs saying, we have a party tonight. If it gets too loud, please just ring our bell or just pass by and have a glass with us. But of course, if there is a group of young people having a party every single night until 3 or 4 in the morning, then the neighbors get annoyed. And then Swiss people maybe call the police a bit quicker than others. But same thing in these shared laundries. Everybody says it works really well in our shared laundry, but at the end, I think there is also a bit of fighting how to leave a shared laundry. It should be basically as clean as you have entered it.
Looks brand. I'll have to say, I once got yelled at in our shared laundry, one of our first apartments, because I just put the soap in and I didn't bother checking to see if the whole soap container was completely clean. Like I didn't wipe it out. I just like I never thought about it, honestly. It's just soap in the thing. And the neighbor came up and spoke to me about it. And I could kind of understand what she was getting at, but it sounded so ridiculous that I was like, I had to ask my husband, I'm like, why is she talking about? Like, what did I do wrong with the laundry? And he's like, oh, you didn't like wipe out the soap container in the washing machine. And I was like, I never in my life would have thought to do that. And I was so embarrassed that I don't know, I'd been doing laundry wrong for all these years.
To explain this, when we explain the lease to the client, we always, explain all these special situations.
Yeah.
And it's always in the additional notes added to the lease. Yeah.
Okay, we'll go on to the schooling guide.
Yeah. So we skip one slide then. That's good. So for the schooling, there's two types. We talked about it slightly already, but there is you cannot choose a local school. It has been mentioned already before. So first you find a house and then you find the school or the school finds you. What is important to know is that as an expat, you can really join a local school. I've done that with my 2 children. I have 3 children. 1 went to the international, 2 went to the local school. And in some areas there is an integrating class. In my case, it was full and it has to go straight into the class. So I was like, oh, no, they don't speak any German. But during German, the classes, they get extra attention. There is Dutch, that's a special extra course for people that are new in Switzerland. So they really help you. And I have to say, both my children, one was 10, the other one was 12. Within 3 months, they spoke German and Swiss German. And after 6 months, they were fluent. So it goes pretty fast. Important to know as well. So English, High German is the standard for the little children at the little ones from 4, 5, 6 years old. They have Swiss.
Kindergarten.
Yeah, the kindergarten. Thank you. Couldn't think of the word. So they have Swiss German. So that's a challenge a little bit, the change between Swiss German and High German. Also, good to know is that the High German also for the Swiss is a second language. They only learn it at school later on. So at home, the kids speak Swiss German. English is not a standard language, but they start like at the school of my children, they started in 5th grade. It depends all on the school and the rules. Important to know why it's not a standard language is that all the contracts, lease contracts, they all come in German. That's where we come around and we can help. Of course, Google Translate helps, but I think it's always worth and very important to check your lease or have your lease checked for any weird clauses. Little children have a lot of freedom. They walk alone to school in a little yellow vest, and it's super cute. And they're also trained by the police how to cross a road, how to act, how to bike. And this can all only be done because there's a very low crime rate. And I know for America, it's very difficult to let go of this because I now have another American client. And she said, yeah, but we had to learn because even if we let our children play outside, sometimes somebody can report you because you're not a good mother, because you don't take care of your children. Well, here it's very important that your children learn to be independent. They don't want you to join them to the school. International school is totally different. So if you're here only a few years, I would say, and you have the money, go for an international school. So my oldest was 15 years old, so that was too late to enter in a Swiss school system. So there's lots of schools, and there's the IZL in Zug, the ZIS in Zurich, the ICS in Zurich. There's bilingual schools. So there is the bilingual schools normally are a little bit cheaper than the international schools. Yeah, so that's actually the most important things about the schooling. Maybe we can go to slide 10 now, or you have some questions, Arielle?
I just have one input because it's really important. If kids go to local schools, they have to walk or take the bike. If a mother would drive the kid to school, she would get a letter from the public school saying, please do not come by car. They also think, and I agree, that walking to school is also quite an important like education for the kid, because they walk maybe with friends. Sometimes they fight, sometimes they get along, sometimes you just see them strolling, picking some flowers, and just basically walking a little bit slower. But driving kids to school is only a thing at international school. It's very un-Swiss, and it would basically not even be accepted. So that's really different between international schools and local schools.
Which, as someone who had our kids in school in New York, and you would just see these like basically a traffic jam at the school every single day, I am so thankful for this rule. It is so nice. Like, it is hard to kind of get into the mindset of it at first, but once you would kind of fully embrace it, you just it works. It works in a way that it would never work in the US, unfortunately.
Good. So
maybe Julia, you can say something about insurances.
Yes, of course. So we have some mandatory insurances. We have some insurances which you are free to choose. But of course, health insurance is one of the mandatory things you have when you come. You have 3 months time to set it up, but then it will count to day one. As said, it's a bit of an expensive part of how you spend your money here in Switzerland, because you can choose several like classes, public insurance, a semi-private or private, and then you can choose the deductible. So usually if you need to see the doctor a lot, you have a low deductible. If you never see the doctor, then you have a high deductible. Then for the housing, it's important to have a liability insurance. It's many times a mandatory thing in the housing contract. So in case, for example, if you lose a key, it's several hundred francs to exchange all those locks, then the liability insurance would kick in. A housing insurance for your content, for your valuables, your electronics, your clothing, everything, in case you have a fire, water, burglar, then you are insured for all kinds of situations. More free to choose insurances would be a legal insurance, for example. Sometimes people get into fights here, and then it's good to have a legal insurance because legals are super expensive, and then it's good if you're already covered with a legal insurance. Then the banks, of course, now we have one very big bank called UBS, because they're merged with Credit Suisse, but also our local banks are very good. Either Zürcher Kantonalbank, Zürcher Kantonalbank, we have all good relations with them. Of course, online banking is also very popular these days. So people have some bank accounts on maybe several banks, but we always, basically adapt on somebody's needs.
I'm going to keep going, and I think we should really breeze through the next couple of slides because we're already at 40 and we've got a lot to cover.
Sure, then dogs is quickly. Marianne?
Yeah, so I'm going to be quick there. So what's important to know is that dogs need to be registered at the town hall. They need to be registered at a vet and at Amicus, that's a database. Please, before you move, check your vaccinations. So they have to be fully vaccinated, and your vet also in America knows what is most important. All the rest we can skip, so to speed up a little bit. Just important to know that some breeds are not allowed. So check carefully before you move what kind of dog you would like to bring. And so that you're not disappointed.
Good. We can go to the next slide. Yeah, thank you. The step by step culture
Okay.
do's and don'ts. I mean, yeah, as said, Swiss seem to be maybe a little bit closed, but I always say if you learn a bit of the language and if you approach the people nicely, invite them for a so-called apéro, which is a happy hour. That's very important. We always shake hands. We use a formal and informal way to speaking to each other. So in business, we use the formal way. If we make friends, then we use an informal way to speak to each other. And so if you try to integrate a little bit with you go to a club or to I don't know, join the fire brigade, for example, then it's definitely easier to integrate and to connect with locals. And so this is our recommendations when coming from abroad.
Okay. And then we're going to kind of get into the tax and financial considerations of moving to Switzerland. And one of the most common questions that I get from individuals who are looking to move abroad is, okay, do I still have to file a US tax return? And unfortunately, because the US has citizenship-based taxation and not residence-based taxation, you still have a tax filing obligation if you are a US citizen or a US green card holder, either way. We also have come across a lot of accidental Americans because it used to be quite common to, go to the US in the 60s or 70s to have children and have them be American. So there are a lot of Swiss people who also kind of secretly have this US passport. And so that's what we call an accidental American. And anyone else with the US sourced income, meaning if you have a business in the US, you have a rental property in the US, anything like that, you'll still have US filing obligations. Just very quickly, when we talk about, do I need to file a US tax return now that I've moved to Switzerland? The thresholds are relatively low. The biggest one here to point out is the married filing separately, which can be a very common filing status if you are moving to be with your Swiss partner. Your Swiss partner is not going to want to enter the US tax system, and you are not going to want them to enter the US tax system. So oftentimes, if you don't have children, you're going to be forced to file married filing separately, which means if you have more than $5 of income, which is like interest income, any type of income, you're going to have to file a US tax return. The other important threshold that's relatively low is the self-employment income threshold. So if you just have a very part-time job and you exceed making more than $400, you're also going to hit that. Overall, these thresholds are relatively low for Switzerland, so most US expats are having to continue to file a US tax return. It's important to note that just because you have to file doesn't necessarily mean you're going to owe anything to the US. There are examples, and a lot of US citizens in Switzerland actually owe additional US tax, but we're going to talk about some of the tax benefits and provisions that are available to US expats. There is a Swiss-US tax treaty in place. The treaty more often helps non-US people than US people, but that is in place. And then, of course, we have our financial asset reporting forms that we need to consider. So that's your FBAR filing and your Form 8938. Those are informational reports to just show the U.S. government I have foreign accounts, because now you do have a Swiss bank account, right? If you have a rental property, you're always going to have a rental account. So it's really important that you're just aware of kind of all these different financial assets you have that are now outside. So very quickly, we have two main tax provisions and benefits for U.S. expats abroad. The first one is the foreign earned income exclusion. And for 2025, you can exclude up to $130,000 of earned income. When I say earned income, I'm talking about income from self-employment, income from wages, I'm not talking about passive income. And passive income is more like, think about dividends and interest. Um, you do need to be, essentially for that first year, you need to be abroad for a full year. You can do a mid-year move and just kind of count days from the next year to still be able to take advantage of that foreign earned income exclusion. This is probably one of the biggest ways to kind of reduce or eliminate double taxation for US citizens abroad. We also have the foreign tax credit. So you are now living in Switzerland, you are a Swiss tax resident, you need to file a Swiss tax return and pay income tax to Switzerland, as well as wealth tax. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. So when you pay taxes to Switzerland, you are going to receive a foreign tax credit on the US side of things. So the important thing to note here is you're always going to pay the higher of US taxes or Swiss taxes. So if you're a Canton Zug or Canton Schwyz where taxes are relatively low, you're almost always going to be owing additional tax to the US if your income is above that $130,000 threshold. If you are in some of the higher tax cantons, so maybe you're down in Geneva, you'll have more foreign tax credit in a higher tax canton, and you'll have more foreign tax credit. It's really important when you move into Switzerland and you look for advisors that they understand both the US and the Swiss tax and financial obligations, because the rules are different. So if you are just a Swiss person living in Switzerland, you can do things and access things that most US expats should not be doing. US citizens we're really like the only country in the world that we have this citizenship-based taxation. And so it basically means that we're wearing handcuffs about how we navigate our personal finances. So if you start working with a Swiss tax preparer or a Swiss financial advisor who's very familiar with how to optimize Swiss taxes, what's going to happen is your Swiss taxes will be reduced and you won't have as much foreign tax credit. And then your US tax liability could potentially increase because it's kind of like a balance, right? If we lower our Swiss taxes, oftentimes our US taxes are going up. And I'm talking more about highly compensated individuals. If you're a student here and you're making 60,000 francs, I'm not really talking to you. You're not really going to owe anything to the US. It's really talking about those highly compensated individuals who are coming in here at the manager executive level. That's where we're seeing a lot of additional US tax liability. It's important to just understand the differences between individual retirement accounts, which is what we have in the United States, and Pillar 3 and Pillar 2 buybacks. So the Switzerland has a 3-pillar system. Pillar 1 is like US, it's equivalent to like US Social Security. Pillar 2 is the employer and employee sponsored plan. So you're both contributing. So think of that almost like a 401k. And you can buy back into that plan. So you can contribute additional funds into your Pillar 2 plan, which sounds like a great idea, right? You want to save for retirement. But unfortunately, what that does is it lowers your Swiss tax liability, but we don't provide a credit for that on the US side. There's no deduction for that on the US side because the Pillar 2 and Pillar 3 plans are not recognized in the US. And so again, that can just increase your US tax liability. And Pillar 3s are a huge no-go for most US expats. And that's simply because the US does not recognize the Pillar 3 accounts at all. And we just see them from a US tax perspective like a foreign investment account. And it's a foreign investment account that you're buying foreign investments in. And foreign investments are often taxed punitively from a US tax perspective. So it's really important to make sure you understand how these things work so that you're not thinking you're doing the right thing by I'm saving for my future self, i.e. I'm saving for, in a Swiss retirement system, except that's not fully recognized by the US. And so you kind of have to think about and do things a little bit differently. We still recommend traditional IRAs for US expats because the benefit there is it is tax deductible in the US. So again, if you have some US tax liability, it is a great way to be able to reduce your US tax liability. And when you don't have access to a US qualified plan, because now you live in Switzerland, you don't have an income cap like you do if you were living in the US. So you can make 1 million Swiss francs a year and you can still make a traditional IRA contribution. You can still make that deductible. So that's an important point to just be sure to look into if you are noticing, okay, I have additional tax liability. Is there a way that I could save for my retirement and reduce my US tax exposure? Other things to just kind of very quickly highlight, Swiss real estate is like the tax incentives around Swiss real estate are very different than they are from the US perspective. So it's just important to really understand kind of the full picture of the tax considerations from a Swiss perspective and a US perspective before you get into kind of investing in real estate or even personal home ownership. In the US, we really incentivize personal home ownership, and we have a relatively large exclusion for having a capital gain after living in that home for only, 2 out of 5 years. Doesn't work like that in Switzerland. So your tax rates really don't drop until like year 10, or ideally more like year 20 of owning that home. So you really have to think about it as more of a long-term investment in Switzerland. Generally, Swiss life insurance products, if you're looking at a product from an investment perspective, those can cause some issues from a US tax perspective. When we're talking about term life insurance, which is pure risk insurance, if you don't die, you don't get anything, that is fine. You should always have term life insurance if you have any dependents. And then again, we mentioned a little bit with foreign investments. If you go to most Swiss banks, they will let you open up a basic saving and checking account. They will not usually allow you to purchase additional investments. If they do, just proceed with caution. Be sure you have your US tax preparer review those to make sure that you're not going to have additional compliance issues from a US perspective. Again, we have additional compliance here with FATCA. FATCA goes both ways now between Switzerland and the US, so everyone's sharing all of your bank information. A common question I get is, can I send more than $10,000 to myself? Am I going to get in trouble? Absolutely. If you have, money that you have in the US and you needed to get it over to Switzerland, you can totally send it. You don't have to worry about this kind of $10,000 threshold. If that money you've, legally obtained, there's really no issue moving funds between Switzerland and the United States. Some other kind of unique Swiss considerations. So Switzerland has 3 parts of the tax system. So just like we have in the US, we have the federal system. Switzerland also has a federal system. Our highest rate in the US right now is 37%. The highest Swiss federal rate right now is 11.5%. And the bulk of your taxes are actually going to be paid at the cantonal level. And cantonal is kind of like thinking about that from a state level. So in the US, we have 50 states plus DC. They all get to decide how they're going to tax their residents. It's the same in Switzerland. So if you are in the German region, our taxes tend to be a little bit lower than, say, like the French region. And I'm actually not even really sure about the Italian region. That's an interesting kind of point to explore. But I think it's more similar with the French region. We also, on top of the cantonal taxes, we also have like the communal rate. So that's kind of like the town that you live in can decide what if there are any additional taxes. Very important to note is we have wealth tax in Switzerland. This is a concept that we just do not have in the United States. It's also important to note that you pay wealth tax in Switzerland, but we have no capital gains tax in Switzerland. And so this is one of a really good example of we have these tax differences between the US system and the Swiss system. So in the US system, there's no wealth tax, but you do pay capital gains tax, which goes anywhere between 0 to 23.8%. Switzerland, no capital gains tax, but you do pay wealth tax, and wealth tax is an annual assessment on your total wealth. So I always find looking at Swiss tax returns really interesting because you'll see a breakdown of, not just financial assets, not just bank accounts, but also, did they own a Picasso and photos of a home? Like I find it really interesting. Jewelry collections, those are all going to be subject to wealth tax, and that's assessed every year as a percentage. And so it's a very interesting concept because you have all these, you can oftentimes have a lot of illiquid assets that you're paying tax on every year, which is one of the reasons why that this kind of Canton Schwyz or Zug are very popular, because I think they have the lowest wealth tax in Switzerland. So if you're, super wealthy, you're trying to go there. I mentioned we have the foreign tax credit. Unfortunately, because we don't have wealth tax in the United States, you're going to pay wealth tax, but you don't get a foreign tax credit in the same way on the US tax return. So that is one place where you kind of have double taxation because it's different taxation. You're going to pay wealth tax to Switzerland, and then you're going to pay capital gains tax on the US side. It's also interesting to note that we also don't have church tax in the United States. And so if you go to register and they ask you what your religion is, if you put down you're Catholic or you're Protestant, you're likely going to be subject to church tax. I don't know if you want to say anything about that. I always find that really interesting. And then people will be like, well, how do I leave? Because I don't even go to the, local church. You basically have to go in and renounce your religion. So that's just kind of again, very different than what we have in the US. And interestingly, church tax actually is part of the foreign tax credit. And that is because church tax is based on your income. So it's an income tax. We talked a little bit about just proceeding with caution with your with property purchases. One of the really interesting things that we have in Switzerland is when you own your own home, when you're filing your tax return, there's actually this calculation that's done. It's called the imputed rental value of an owner-occupied property. So it's almost like you're paying tax on rent that if you had rented the property. So just again, this concept, we do not have this in the US. So it's just really important. Ask a lot of questions about all these little decisions that you're thinking about. Where am I going to bank? How am I going to save and invest for the future? How are we going to buy real estate abroad? Always be asking the full questions and making sure you understand the US tax obligations around that. Okay, I ran through that. We have got 3 minutes left. You can connect with both of us, the Allianz Relocation team and myself on Instagram. And I don't know, last couple of minutes, what other things should we tie up here?
Maybe someone of the audience still has a question.
I don't know if any questions popped up.
And otherwise, we can tell them some funny stories. So you said that something about the lowering of the grass. So when I arrived in Switzerland in 2011, well, we're super happy. We found a house. Well, we didn't have a choice. There was just one place and we had to take it. Nobody else wanted us. We were 3 children and a dog, and we were just too much for most people. And so we had one place in Hunneberg where we ended up, and we were mowing the grass. And suddenly there was a man standing in front of us. "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, mowing the grass." And he said, "Exactly." So I was like, okay, but can't we mow the grass? No, it's Sunday. And on Sunday, we don't do that. We respect each other's rest. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
We
And
go
now
to church or we go to the mountains and hike.
yeah. And eat. They like to eat a lot with friends all day long
True.
on Sunday. On Sunday, there's big brunches.
Cheese fondue in wintertime, barbecue in summertime.
What is nice
Since
outside,
restaurants are so expensive, we prefer to invite the people at home and cook for them.
or what is really nice, and Arielle, you probably have done this with your children as well. You just go somewhere near the lake and there are these fire pits and little tables and wood, and you just fry a sausage and have some bread and some homemade salad with you. And I must say that my children really, really love it. Also in school, oh, we're going into the woods. Mom, you have to buy a sausage. And at the beginning, I thought, like,
Yes.
what? Buying a sausage? How can you bring a raw sausage to the school? But yeah, and they do it and they love it. Yeah.
I love that. And we actually moved here from Germany, and in Germany there was no like open fire pits. And here it's just
Everywhere.
so nice. You can just go and build a little fire, and it's just like in our town actually, like they drive around and they fill up the
Wood.
firewood.
Yeah, they
Yes.
fill it.
It's
Here as
free.
well. Berg.
They give you
Yeah.
free wood.
Okay, well, we're at time. Thank you so much, Marianne and Julia, for joining us today, sharing your insights and your expertise. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
very
Arielle.
much, Arielle, for having
Pleasure.
us.